Ashley Hathaway, and today I'll be presenting you my grant proposal pitch. So first I would like to know if anyone has ever heard of microplastics by a show of hands. Okay, perfect. So at least some of you know what microplastics are, and you're aware of them. So a microplastic is defined as anything that is under 5 millimeters in diameter. There are 5 types of microplastics that include fibers, microbeads, fragments, noodles, and foam. So all of these end up in our aquatic systems, in our marine environments, and they end up accessible to species that are living in these environments, and the species end up unknowingly ingesting them. So this has been known to cause higher stress responses and early morphological changes in species such as the water flea. However, it is unknown of whether or not this consumption of microplastics can cause behavior changes in species. So I'm going to be addressing a few questions when it comes to microplastic consumption in marine species. So firstly, I have a very broad statement of, does the consumption of microplastic by S. indicus change their behavior when competing for food sources? S. indicus is a species of sardines that is very low in the food chain, and they're also commercially bought and sold, so they're very important to us and their environment. My subset of questions will address whether or not microplastic consumption makes S. indicus more or less aggressive, if there's a specific amount of microplastic consumption that S. indicus must consume in order to have a changed behavior, if there's a threshold of microplastic consumption that will change the behavior of S. indicus from active to inactive, and lastly, if the type of microplastic consumed will have an effect on the behavior of S. indicus. 1 second, need a sip break. So to test these questions, I have lots of methodology up here that is very wordy and would take a lot of time to explain, so I'm just going to go over it really quickly. So in this first part, we're testing whether or not the amount of microplastic consumed will change the behavior of S. indicus. So we'll have 3 experimental groups. The first will be our control group, which is 0% microplastic contamination in their diet. Second is 1% microplastic contamination. And thirdly is 5% microplastic contamination. So here we'll be putting groups of fish of 10 into tanks together, and we'll be, after they have had their diet of microplastics, and we'll be allowing them to compete for food once they have ingested their microplastics. So we'll be using an ethogram to test this and to track their behaviors while they're competing for their food. We'll also be recording and tagging the fish in order to be able to distinguish the fish while observing them. In the second part of the experiment, we'll be doing the same exact thing. However, we'll be testing whether or not microplastic type will have an effect on the behavior. So the 3 types of microplastics we're testing are fibers, microbeads, and fragments. So we'll be recording them and tagging them just the same. However, we'll be giving them a diet of either fibers, microbeads, or fragments indefinitely. So one group will have one and the other and the other. Here's our ethogram. We have a handful of behaviors that we're testing. A lot of them are dealing with aggression and whether the fish are active or not. So after all the data is collected, my proposed analysis will be to run 2 one-way ANOVAs, one for the amount of microplastic consumed and one for the type of microplastic consumed. So here's my proposed data for the amount of microplastic consumed. You can see when no microplastic is consumed, you have fish that are still active, but you don't see a lot of aggression. But this changes abruptly at a 1% microplastic consumption when you have spikes and aggressive behaviors, and then 5% microplastic consumption, you see a big drop, which is meaning that the fish are consuming so much toxins that they begin to show lethargy. And lastly, we have the proposed results for the type of microplastic consumed. So very generally, you can see that fibers and microbeads are about the same. However, you see a big spike in aggressive behaviors when fish are consuming fragments. And this is thought to be because there are more toxins in fragments than the other two types of microplastics. And since, sorry, I forgot that part. Since my data shows all of this, then we can assume that all species will show the same results. Thank you for your time, but I do not have time for questions today. I'm going to have to go.